In this episode of the Cars.co.za podcast, filmed at Naamsa Auto Week, we talk with Andrew Kirby, CEO of Toyota South Africa, about the concept of de-industrialisation of the South African automotive industry. Andrew emphasises that the country and the auto industry are showing signs of de-industrialisation, evident in the dropping contribution of the industry, the auto industry's GDP, and the decline of local content in the vehicles that we are manufacturing locally. To counter this trend and also sustain our exports on a global basis, Andrew introduces us to the concept of software-defined vehicles and also emphasises the importance that the local market mirrors the global market in terms of the vehicles that we manufacture as well as purchase. The discussion also touches upon the threat posed by imported brands, especially the Chinese manufacturers, who may not have had to play by the same set of rules that Toyota has had to play by over the years. He talks about the threat that gives to both to local jobs, particularly within the manufacturer, but also along a lengthy local component supply chain. Stay tuned. Now, Andrew, welcome to the podcast, firstly.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, you gave a fascinating presentation earlier. You used a word called reindustrialization to the automotive industry. What exactly is that?
Well, there are two aspects to it. The first is that as a country, we have been deindustrializing. And as an auto sector, we're starting to see early signs of deindustrializing. So let me paint the picture. From a country point of view, we used to have 19% of our contribution as a manufacturing sector to the GDP of the country. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that's now dropped to 13%. That would be okay if we'd been able to establish a deep level of manufacturing capabilities with deep level of supply chains, but we didn't. And we've actually lost a lot of our manufacturing value addition over the last 25 years. So it's a big change from 19% to 18%. Of that, 22, 23% is from the auto sector. So we almost 1/4 of the manufacturing or industrialization contribution to the country. The challenge that we have at the moment is there are two factors. One is our level of local content, so the level of components and value that's added in South Africa has been slowly dropping because the level of local content per vehicle is actually unfortunately declining. So the last 5 years has dropped from 41 to 39%.
So local content would be the parts and components within that
are purchased from component suppliers in South Africa.
So it's easy to focus on the manufacturers. You assemble the cars together, you see the end product, but also then the people, all the parts in that supply chain, those parts. And I assume they produce the parts and also export them as well.
Yeah, and that's almost more important because the skills and the workforce is a lot larger in the component supply base than it is in an OEM. So typically, if you have one job in an OEM, you can create 4 jobs in a supply base. So the multiplier and the opportunity to create employment is a lot larger in our component supply base. And if they can supply the local OEMs and can also export, then there's a tremendous economic contribution from that.
And that's material because, I mean, the headline figure is 5% of our economy is based on the automotive industry. But that's not just the small number. It's about 7 people who manufacture locally, but there's that supply chain of parts as well.
Right. So the 5.2% contribution from the auto sector to the GDP of South Africa, 3.2% of that is from manufacturing, which includes the component supply base, and 2% is from the retail side of the business.
Because, I mean, people forget how material that is, but, I mean, Ford had to announce recently layoffs because of the United States tariffs. And so, that global supply chain impacts us from an employment perspective very quickly.
It does. We are very reliant on exports. So roughly 68% of our total production is exported, and the majority of that is to Europe and the UK.
But in terms of reindustrialization, what is the catalyst? What has to change to stop this imminent decline, but actually increase the pace of industrialization?
So there are a few things. We need to generate scale, and that's been one of the challenges in the South African market. Whilst we've seen a fairly good growth in our volume this year, looks like we'll end up at about 590,000 markets. Last year we had 535, so it looks good. But it's the first time we've been higher than the pre-COVID levels.
Right.
And if you look back even further, it's far from our highest level of 2006-07, where we did over 714,000.
Because if you want to manufacture locally, it's important to have at least a significant proportion of those cars being sold locally. They don't need to be exported because you've got a local market.
So that's the first step. The second step was that we need to be able to strengthen our exports. And whilst it's good that we have a strong export base, it's very exposed to, as I mentioned, Europe and the UK. And the only way we're going to be able to sustain those exports is to transition to new energy vehicles.
Oh, very true.
So if we don't change, we're going to slowly see our manufacturing volumes decline over time. One, because the local market is buying less locally manufactured vehicles, and two, because the export markets are buying less South African sourced vehicles. And so we have to have specific interventions to address those two aspects.
Because we can be heretics if we like and not want to go electric and so on, but in the end, we're just part of a global market, and if everyone else has gone that way, we don't stand alone.
Exactly. The last thing we want to do is be left behind. And the R&D investment into new energy vehicles is enormous. And I think often we're also a little bit mistaken by just thinking about it as the drivetrain. It's a lot broader than that. We use the term SDV, which is software-defined vehicles. So the software in the vehicle is becoming a lot more part of the customer experience.
Yes.
And you can talk about connectivity, autonomous driving, safety mechanisms. But the whole value in the vehicle is moving away from steel to software, to put it bluntly. And so the risk for South Africa is that we continue to produce internal combustion engines with relatively conventional technology, and in 10 to 15 years' time, all we'll be able to supply is South Africa, because the rest of the world would have moved on.
And that software is also developed on a global basis as well. You're not very developed software to this market, and that market is developed on that global basis.
Precisely. We don't have any value contribution to software. So we really need to be growing our transition to new energy vehicles, growing our localization of safety equipment, electronics, engine management systems. And ultimately, we'll need to have a hand in manufacturing and assembling batteries in South Africa.
One of the speakers earlier mentioned ports. How much is that an issue? Are we able to export and import through our ports effectively? Or is that becoming an issue as well?
Yeah, so our port operations did go through a number of challenges. We had, especially when we talk about the processing of containers, and containers obviously it has a big impact on manufacturing. We had at one point a weak point of 21-day delay through the Durban port, as an example. July, August, we're running at 2 days, which is global performance levels. So at the moment, the efficiency through our ports, and it's not just Durban, is actually very good, and it's improved significantly. There's been a lot of investment in new equipment. The maintenance programs are doing better. The performance culture in the ports has really improved. The challenge, however, though, is specifically for OEMs that are based inland. The logistics costs of getting their vehicles and components from the coast to the inland operations is quite high. And that's largely because our rail is very weak. The condition of our railways is poor. But there is, fortunately, a big process now to create an environment where private companies can access the rail infrastructure. And that's just been recently announced by Minister Creasy. And we'll see over the next few years a big improvement in rail. But in terms of import-export, that's the single remaining obstacle that we need to overcome as a country.
Because really in automotive, it's a global supply chain. All those parts, 10,000 parts per vehicle, they come from all different parts of the world.
Yeah, we have to be integrated into that supply chain. And the design of those particular parts is also done globally. So to be able to compete, to localize that part, you need scale. And you need to demonstrate that you've got a reliable supplier who's got the technology, who's got the skills, can achieve the quality, and is cost competitive. And we have to achieve that every single time we localize a part.
So if one country decides to rewrite the rules of local trade,
as has been done.
Yes, as we are witnessing right now. We can go onto YouTube tonight and there's some new rule that's come out. But is that causing Toyota as much problems as some of the other participants here?
Not to South Africa. We don't export to the United States, as an example, at all. We have a few of our suppliers that do, but in looking at the detail, they're going to be okay. So we've been okay. Toyota globally, absolutely.
Must be causing a lot of headaches. Let's talk locally. Now, at the minute, the industry is going through probably the highest amount of change over this past 2 or 3 years than it has gone, and it's all because of the Chinese brands entering the country. Now, when you look at these brands coming in, they're getting great traction. They're bringing great products into the country, but you're probably the granddad of brands in this country. Are they having to play by the same rules that you've had to play with as Toyota has built its brand?
No, I think the situation now in 2025 is very, very different. We had to localize our manufacturing operations very early on. In fact, we started selling in 1961 and we localized in 1963. That's certainly not the case now for the new import.
And that was an expectation back then?
That was an expectation, and the way the policy was written, it was also a necessity because the import duties were much higher. And now it's possible with the scale, particularly that Chinese and Indian companies have, they can compete and be almost more competitive even though we have some import duty. So we have to rethink that. I think competition is good. The disruption is good, ultimately good for customers, but we need to balance that with an investment in South Africa. Not just, let me dump a whole lot of cars in the country, see if they survive or not, and then decide to remain or exit. Because that's going to harm a lot of consumers, and it's going to create a lot of turmoil. There needs to be some balance where, yes, if you want to compete, that's fantastic, but invest in the country.
Because if you buy a locally made Hilux, which you do vast numbers locally, you guys can point to the jobs that creates along the supply chain.
Right.
But if you buy one of the imported brands, that's just not an argument you can actually use.
No, there are no jobs created.
That whole accusation that they're subsidized in some way, is that real?
Yeah, I can't talk with authority on it, but I can say that Europe, Canada, the United States have all done extensive research. The numbers coming out has been 37%. Some countries have, their consultants have quoted higher figures. There's definitely a support, but it does vary. It varies also on the town or the province that the OEM is located in. But it comes down to utilities support, labor support, land support, low-cost energy support. So there are many different ways, and there are various ways. I think what's important, though, is that they have a slightly softening market in China, so they have excess capacity.
Yes.
So it does put them in a position where they don't initially have to cover all of their costs to make it viable to be able to export those products.
In a situation of excess capacity, the strong temptation is produce anyway, move it to somewhere where at least you're going to recover some of the cost.
Right.
Is the pressure at an industry level for people to pull their weight? Is that a thing?
I'm not sure at an industry or government level what the real temperature is around this. I think we know that it's costing jobs, but we also know that we need to transition. We need to be careful of not reacting too soon because the disruption and the competitive products are good. But there is certainly an understanding that there needs to be some link to investing in the country and not just a trial and error approach to our market. And we've become a little bit like that. The barriers to entry in South Africa are very small. Anybody can come in and trial it, see how it goes for a year. But that's enormously disruptive, and that does cost the economy and it costs jobs.
So let's segue to Toyota.
Yep.
Hilux. It's not a Bucky, it's a Hilux. That's a great slogan. I quote that one a lot. It's a great slogan. But it's been a success story over generations. Can you keep that going?
Well, absolutely. That's obviously our intent, right? So we've now had 8 generations of Hiluxes. We've been able to get very, very high levels of local content, local supplier support, and dare I say local design in terms of the ruggedness, the durability of the vehicle. Is extensively tested on our test track, and our intention is with every product upgrade to try and improve its competitiveness.
I think it's extensively tested by every farmer in the country as well. Yes. And let's talk another success story, more recent. Corolla Cross has been a huge success.
And
is that just because you called it Corolla and it didn't look like Corolla? Or is it, what's the
no, not at all. Not at all. I really think that the concept and the package was very disruptive. We call it a C segment size SUV. Was doing very small volumes, and when we localized it and we could be that competitive with the product, it really caught the country's imagination. And also bringing it with a hybrid, that completely exceeded our expectations. We'd literally forecast about 15 to 20% hybrid uptake, and it went to 50% just like that.
Because a few years ago, you guys were talking hybrid and everyone else was talking EP.
Exactly.
And you stuck to your guns. Turns out you were right.
We were right because of the value proposition. It's not that EVs are not great technology. They're just too expensive. So the price premium that a customer is prepared to pay in South Africa is quite easy to understand now for a hybrid and for a plug-in hybrid and for a BEV. At the time, there was a feeling that these plug-in hybrids and BEVs would be a lot more accessible, and they're not. They are expensive.
But it's the price proposition.
It's the price proposition.
We're not going to pay a premium because it's greener. Paying a premium because the value proposition is there.
Yeah, Corolla Cross, for example, uses 35% less fuel. You do that calculation off over a year, and it more than pays for the premium of the hybrid.
Yes.
It's not true for some of the other plug-in hybrids and battery electric vehicles. It's the payback period is too long.
But now another success story has been that relationship you have with Suzuki, which is very much the smaller vehicles in the market. How do you see that growing and developing?
Well, I think it's been globally a good alliance. The relationship is with the manufacturing operations in India. We have a Toyota plant where we build some of their vehicles. We build some of ours, and they build both Toyota and Suzuki vehicles in their Suzuki plants. And having access to those models for Africa, as well as South Africa, has been very successful.
It's been immensely successful. You've kept everyone else out of that segment, as it were, because the Chinese brands come in there after SUV. In fact, it's probably the most over-traded segment. Biggest segment, the fastest growing, but still over-traded. Whereas that segment, the smaller cars, is still hugely valuable.
That B segment and A segment is by far the biggest in South Africa. Where the Chinese are focused is D and C. So that would be equivalent to our Corolla Cross and RAV4. It does make sense because in China, they also have larger vehicles, and those are the types of models that do extremely well there. And the premiums are a little bit higher. The B segment cars are a lot more cost sensitive, and you need to build a real scale to be able to compete. We do think, but we do think that there are going to be a lot more players that are going to start moving into that B segment because it's the single biggest segment in South Africa.
And it's entry level, it's that first car ball.
Exactly.
So thank you very much for your time. It's been fascinating to talk to you, and thank you for explaining that whole idea of industrialization. We do forget how important this industry is to us. And it's very much reinforced to me that if you buy a Hilux, you are creating more jobs.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Super. Thank you.